Look, the most powerful word in marketing, brand building, is new.
The way that we tell the story is important in the sales, in the pitch process.
Totally. I would say as if not even more important than the way you communicate it out into the market.
I love your definition of the brand.
Why do people have to stand in the pouring rain outside to get the latest iPhone? Because they need a new phone? I'm not so sure about that. Ask those basic questions. What business am I in? Who am I trying to appeal to? Why would they buy it? But where I find most companies were really not connecting the final dot was
My today's guest is an entrepreneur and a founder of Level 5, consultancy that partners with clients to create value through their brands. He's also a adjunct professor with a real-world experience and probably the one who's most responsible for the fact that Stella Artois became a global brand. David, hello and welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So why don't we start with Stella? How did Stella grew that big from the very beginning?
Well, I appreciate your intro comment, but to say that I'm responsible for becoming a global brand, I'm not sure I can take that that kind of credibility. Look, when Labatt, where I was the head of strategy and the chief marketing officer at the time, we did a joint venture with two Belgian families and created a company that we called Interbrew. And Interbrew was responsible for trying to take its core brands, Stella Artois being probably the largest, but Hoegaarden and there are other brands that they had done very well with in Belgium and in Europe. And when we came together, the whole idea was they would be able to take some of our brands and introduce them into Europe, and we would take their brands and introduce them into North America. So when the deal was done, and it came down to now actioning things, Stella Artois proved to be the lead brand. It didn't matter whether we were going that way or they were coming this way. It was definitely the lead brand, and the timing couldn't have been better because when we introduced it first into Canada, through a company that we had created called the Olin Specialty Beer Company, and then into the U.S. The timing couldn't have been better, Frederick, because it was right about then that premium import brands really had started to take off. It was almost like a whole new category within the beer market in North America. And, the Heinekens of the world, the Carlsbergs of the world, the Becks of the world. And what better brand for us to, put our hat into that ring than Stella Artois? And we did so, and we wanted though to make sure that it was reflective of the heritage of the brand, out of its European roots. It's over 200 years old. I mean, it's not a new brand, so to speak, and the equity and the traditions of the brand that had become, I guess, commonplace in Europe were introducing a whole new wow factor in North America because we'd never had these types of brands before. And so we decided that not only would we launch the brand, but we would launch it with full due respect for how the brand had grown in Europe. And by that, I mean, it was a draft culture over in Europe, as you know. And we launched it as a draft product first, which meant we also launched it with its own whole brand of glassware. So the unique glasses that you see Stella poured in today, which are common now, boy, that was something new. The pouring etiquette, how you actually got a bartender to pour the beer into that glass, to cut the head, to put the little doily, the drip mat around the bottom of the glass, like things that again today we take as just common. That was all brand new. Now, reflective of the heritage and the style of the brand from Europe, but totally new in North America. So when we launched Stella Artois, we didn't just launch the beer into the marketplace. We launched the brand experience around the beer. And I think that is what gave us a major point of difference. And I would say a very unique set of relationships with bar staff, because we would bring them in and train them on how to do all of what I've just talked about. And it was the first time that any brewer had really taken them aside to say, you're not just pouring beer into a glass. Like, there's a whole ritual around it. It's like Guinness, the same sort of thing. So it was a big part of establishing the brand and its reputation in North America.
Awesome. So you're mentioning a wow factor, basically a novelty, and the importance of the heritage in launching a new brand or a new business. And how's that different to revitalizing or building onwards the brands or the businesses that are stuck?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that Level 5 deals with regularly with its clients. Look, the most powerful word in marketing, brand building, is new. So it's got the wow factor. It's new. People are always interested in things that are new. Yeah. The problem with it is you can only be new for a short period of time. So you better make sure that you use that wow factor to establish the credibility. So even if it's a brand that's been in the market for 100 years, every brand goes through life cycles. They get launched, they rationalize, they grow, hopefully, they become a very loyal brand to consumers, and then they start to die off. Well, at that point, the brand owner needs to decide, do we want to revitalize the brand, or do we just want to kind of milk it and let it, demise? And I love those that have got the smarts to revitalize. But what that means is you're looking for that new wow factor in something that's 100 years old. And people say, well, you can't do that. And to that I say, that's bunk. That's not true. Every brand, when thought of as a set of benefits to a market, can always come up and find something not only that is new, but it is valued by its consumers, by its market. And it all comes down to just really tight upfront assessments and strategy to make sure you're putting the brand in the right market to the right people, pushing the right buttons that they value, and you can revitalize. So the wow factor is just as important on a 100-year-old brand as it is one that's not even 100 hours old.
How does that apply to modern tech businesses that are on a much faster trajectory of their lives and their development?
Well, that life cycle that I talked about exists for every brand, every sector, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. The reality, though, in the tech sector, because it is technology driven, technology changes at the speed of light. So therefore, if the brand is about nothing but the technology, that brand's life cycle is likely to be very, very short, because if it proves to be successful, another brand will come in and either copy it and reduce the price on it, or they will build from it, and you no longer are new. So the life cycle is shorter, but the same logic applies to managing the growth for a tech brand. And I think I can point to certain technology-based brands. Take a Microsoft, for example, huge brand in the 80s, huge brand in the 90s, huge brand in the 2020s, because they continued to revitalize it. They didn't get trapped in the technology is simply about what it does. It's not just about the product and the technical features of the product. That's all rational thinking. Flip it on its head, take the capability that the technology provides and say, now think about what are the benefits that capability provides to that target market. So you're now talking about a different positioning. It's not about the thing, it's about what the thing does for people. And that you can extend shelves life quite easily with that.
So what would be your advice to an entrepreneur in the tech space on how to expand out of the technology world and how to build brand on that emotional side in order to live more than only a short life cycle of their business?
Sure. Well, then Level 5, as you know, has done a lot of work with technology firms. And we like to say, look, it starts with the founder. It starts with the entrepreneur, as you call them, who's discovered this capability, this product. And it means changing their mindset, right? If, I like to say to these, they're mostly younger, right? They're eager, they're keen, they've got very engineering backgrounds, IT backgrounds. They just want to look what this great thing is and we're going to put it in the market. Well, okay, but just pause for a second. And I say to them, in all of my almost 50 years now of doing this stuff, there are really only two basic business models. One is what I call a product-fed business model. Look what I can make. It does this thing, and we're going to build it and make it and provide it into the market. And those can work. I'm not saying that BlackBerry originally, its growth was built off of that mindset. But the other business model, if it's one's product fed, the other one is called market led. And your start point is what is the need in the market? Who am I trying to sell this to? What's the benefit that will bring those people? And to your question, those benefits of that product are both a bundle of rational things and that's the stuff that it does, the functionality of it. It's got a better camera, it's got faster processing speed, whatever it might be. I'm not saying that that's not part of the positioning, but if you then say, and here are the emotional benefits that having this capability brings: self-confidence, a stronger sense of innovation. I feel like I'm more in the know. I'm cooler. I'm whatever it might be. Why do people have to stand in the pouring rain outside to get the latest iPhone? Because they need a new phone? I'm not so sure about that. Because they need the new Apple iPhone. It's a statement. It's a badge, right?
Yeah.
So I say to them, pause, be market led, think about those emotional benefits and attributes, as well as what the functionality of your product is.
So if I'm a startup owner and I'm just kicking off my business, I have a great product idea. What would be the one thing that you would suggest to do in terms of to build that emotional side, in terms of tools, like a practical advice?
Yep. Go through the logical steps of who is the market that I want this product to appeal to? Who am I going to sell to? I can't sell to everybody. Right? This product does certain things, and there are certain segments of the marketplace that need that or will therefore value that more than others. Right?
Okay.
And understand the needs of that segment and understand the emotional needs as well as the functional needs, so that when you do launch it, ask those basic questions. Right? What business am I in? Who am I trying to appeal to? Why would they buy it? Why would they care? And if you ask those three questions, you suddenly might find you position things a bit differently.
Gotcha. So that would then mean that if I'm launching an app for a new social connection or for a marketplace that connects the whatever type of business providers and their customers, a party would be a good asset for the launch, and for the brand.
Yeah. I mean, let people play with it.
Yeah.
But invite the right people to the party is all I'm saying. Don't just open the doors and say, free bar. If you've gone through those questions, I know who I want at the party. Make sure the right people are there.
Thank you. That's so true. We spoke so many times about the brand and the brand building, you and I. I love your definition of the brand. So can you please tell us for the wider audience as well?
Yeah. I mean, when I started Level 5, this is more as just backdrop, but I was basically walking around saying what a brand wasn't. Because when I said brand to people, leading CEOs of big companies, they would say, well, our marketing's just fine. And I'd say, well, that's good. And I'm sure it is. It's wonderful marketing. I'm not here to talk to you about your marketing. I'm here to talk to you about your brand. And what I found was they didn't understand the difference. And I therefore said, for the first 3 or 4 years of Level 5, no, a brand isn't marketing. A brand is something different. And I got a shove from a partner, a mentor, who said, okay, I think your time has run out. You can no longer build your company basically telling them what a brand isn't. You got to say, therefore, what a brand is. And I worked on it. And I'll be honest with you, here's somebody that had spent his entire life in that sector. And every time I would come up with something, I'd go, sounds a little geeky, sounds a little technical, sounds a little too difficult, too complex to understand. And I was actually visiting a friend, and I woke up in the middle of the night. I swear to God, it's a true story. And this comment was in my mind. So I got up and I wrote it down. And then I played with it a bit. But what it basically captured were the 3 things or elements that I think are required to have a brand. The first is an understanding that it's value. It's an asset. A brand is an asset. Brand's not marketing, that's an expense. So a brand actually sits on your balance sheet. It's what you can leverage. It's why you stand in the pouring rain to get the Apple iPhone, right? So the brand is value. It also creates or delivers a promise to the market. Here's what I'm going to bring you. So that emotional and rational, functional benefits that we talked about. And I got a position against that. That's my unique selling proposition, right? But where I find most companies were really not connecting the final dot was once you make a promise in the market, if you want it to create value, you have to consistently keep it. If you don't, chances are this promise will become meaningless because nobody will believe you as much as you may want to. You could have the best marketing campaign in the world about all these wonderful things it does, but if they buy your product and it sucks, it's constantly breaking, it's not delivering on the expectations the promise made, you're not going to drive value. So my definition of a brand is the value of a promise consistently kept. Super simple. Even the engineers and everybody, the accountants that I would say it to, and that kind of makes sense, but that's very simple. And I went, yeah.
So value of the promise consistently kept.
Yeah.
So what it means is that the brands, the businesses are constantly making certain promises in the market space. And by making those promises, they're telling actually their stories and why are their products and features important, valuable, both functional and emotional features.
Right.
And therefore, I think the storytelling is very important in the brand building space.
It's critical, and especially in today's world. I mean, with social media and digital capabilities being what they are, AI coming in. If you don't tell your story about that brand, somebody else will.
Yeah.
And it could be your competitor that is now telling your story, and it won't be favorable. It could be the market saying, "Hey, I went and bought this new, product X, and it sucks." Well, that word gets out very, very quickly. So the way you tell your story has to be rooted in the promise, but it has to be meaningful to all of those audiences that we talked about.
So we touched the base on the startups and the importance of the emotional side of their business in building their businesses and their brands. Now, what about the other way around? We used to have the landscape of the marketing and communications has changed dramatically in last 20 years with all the technology, social media, Google searches, and all the tools that we now have available to communicate and to tell the stories of our brands. How does that blend with the traditional media that we had for the modern brand managers and marketing managers that are building traditional businesses?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's something that when I teach my MBA course, I actually talk about this. Everybody always said that with the next evolution of communication technology, it meant the end of everything that came before it. So when television came around, well, radio's dead. Well, I can get in my car right now. It's just radio evolved. I now listen to, Sirius FM or whatever. So technology, the different mediums through which you can tell your story, all have a capability. So depending on what your story is, if it's simply, look, I need to make sure I target the right people and I just tell them this is what this product can do for you. And there is an industry, either a digital or a print industry periodical that goes out and keeps people in that small sector up to date, there's a great place to tell that story. If you're trying to build all of that emotional, well, we know that sight and sound are very important components to stirring the emotions. So, using simply print mediums, whether it be newspaper, whether it be magazines, whether it be outdoor billboards, you may not be able to get all of that. So each technology, each capability does a job. They're not all the same, and they don't reach people with the same capabilities. So you have to start not with how much can I afford to buy media, so I'll buy the media that's I can afford. It's no. You might be able to afford it, but it doesn't reach who you're trying to target. So going back to those initial questions that I talked about. So mediums, I think, are going to continue to evolve and are going to continue to be added to. And it's up to the marketer, the brand owner, to say, how do I leverage that capability to tell my story? And which ones are best at doing that?
Yeah. I fully agree. The good blend of the choices of the media is of the utmost important in order to grab the attention and break the clutter and have that poetry, that storytelling heard with the target audience. You mentioned at the beginning how you and the team actually expanded Stella Artois to North America, and you mentioned something that I find very important is like the entire experience. So, how does the experience that prowess big in building the business and the brand?
Well, go back to your previous question. How do all of the touch points? I can talk to, use the beer, one I know. But you go into the grocery world or packaged goods or into tech, it doesn't matter. Every brand can create an experience through a whole range of different touch points, right? It might be I want to go on Google and search for information about products in a certain category, or a problem that I've got, who can solve it for me? Well, that's a touch point. So therefore, if I'm not in that top of the search, I might not be clicked on, which is another touch point. So you see where I'm going with this. I mean, you walk into a grocery store, you've got the flyer about what's on sale, but the first, end aisle display you run into is the competitor at a 10% lower price. They've just beat you to the touch point. So understanding all of the touch points that your consumer, your market, could potentially, I'm not saying they go through all of them. Everybody doesn't go through all of them all the time, but mapping out all of the potential touch points and all that social media and I would say any form of digital media that allows for a two-way sharing of questions and answers and information, all that's done is add more touch points. So it's not, well, social media is all I need. Well, okay, but you might need to be, if you're in a highly competitive consumer category, I might need awareness before I worry about its relevance. And there may be cheaper, easier ways to gain relevance. So you got to think through, and it's a discipline. It's mapping all of those touch points out. And it sounds easy, but trust me, I've worked with many brands and they go, well, it's in the store and it's the packaging and well, that's the beginning. Well, let's think different. And by the end of the exercise, they're all like, whoa, I never thought about that stuff.
So how would you find, again, I'm coming back to this duality of the virtual technology and the real world that we live in, because we're now spread into both as businesses, as consumers, and as customers. So how would you describe, or would you have a recipe for blending the two? Like the real life experience, throwing parties, teaching cooking for your meal or for your spices brand versus virtual.
Doing it all online. Yeah. Look, I'm simply showing my bias. I do believe that ultimately, and especially on higher ticket purchases, like the more expensive the product is, the more people still want that physical connection. That I want to see it. I want to hold that bottle of $500 whiskey or whatever it might be. Like I want to engage with it. If all I can do is kind of look at it, and sure, on my search engine, I can turn it 360 degrees and I can look at it, and that's not the same as the visceral kind of that emotional connection. So I think, my bias is, and again, especially on more high ticket items, I personally could not buy a car just online. I bought a Genesis.
Yeah.
Right? They have no deal. They've got no showrooms, right? They've got a few little places that they read, but there's no showrooms as we know the car industry. And I thought, that's kind of cool. And I went on and I looked at the models and I did all the right stuff. I still had to sit in the car.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what it felt like, and I wanted to take it on a test drive.
No, I think you're 100% right, because and this came up in a recent discussion which I had with one of my customers, that as much as we are immersed in technology, we are still humans, and the emotions play a significant part. Mm-hmm. With that said, you and I had a number of chats on the topic of marketing / brand building versus sales. So I'd like to touch that point a little bit, and what's the role of the brand building and storytelling in the actual process of selling and actual customer acquisition?
Well, I'm trying to short order our discussion because I basically said I don't view them as separate things, brand building and sales. I view them all, talk about those touch points, the way you sell a product to a customer who then might sell it to a consumer is just as important a touch point as the advertising or the design of the product. So I that's why I use the term commercial strategies now. So I build the brand. It can be the greatest brand, but if I can't sell it effectively, it's a waste of time and effort. Said the other way, if there's no real brand to it, all I'm selling is I'm not selling, I'm pushing a transaction. And it all comes down eventually to value, to price. So you need that perfect balance. And the way I sell a product into the market should be reflective of the brand promise and the target audience of who I'm going after. And the beauty of technology now is that targeting capability, I can go down to the individual. It's no longer, a mass segment with 3 million people. And I hope I resonate with some of them. I know what you're looking for. I know when you're going to be looking for it. My level of understanding of your needs goes up. Well, is that sales? Or is that just being smarter brand builder? Who cares? It's the combination of the two. So I see them as linked.
I mean, 100%. I'm fully with you on that one. Basically, the way that we tell the story is important in the sales, in the pitch process.
Totally.
And it has to be grounded in our brand promise, our positioning, in order to actually open up and actually close the deal or the sales.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about Stella Artois,
yeah,
and I spent quite a bit of time talking about the training we would put bar staff through on how to pour the drink. Well, that's selling. That's how I want them to sell. Well, but it's part of the story of the brand. So it's probably a good example of why I have the bias I've got and why I call it the commercial strategy and effort behind a brand.
Love it. One of the things that I think you and I also agree, I don't recall if we had this discussion, but is the importance to have the key stakeholders aligned around the brand positioning, brand promise, be it in large corporations with all different departments and all district area managers and operations and supply chain on the supply chain side, or even for the smaller companies, for the startups. I think the awareness of their team, even though they might not be direct part of their company, but understanding what the brand promise is and how to pitch is very important. How do we tell those stories? And how is that different to speaking outside to our customer and the target audience?
Well, I'm glad you're bringing it up because it's something that, surprisingly, we still have to not convince, but push clients to say your internal launch of your brand and its promise in the market is, I would say, as if not even more important than the way you communicate it out into the market. Go back to my value, promise, consistently kept. Well, if they don't understand what the promise is, how can I expect them to consistently keep it? If they don't understand what the promise is and why that group of people might want it, why would I expect anybody within the organization to come up with an idea that, what if we did it this way? That would make that promise even better, wouldn't it? You have to have the consistently kept part in place, or the promise, as I said, either dies a quick death or it dies on the vine, because the people that are responsible for it day in, day out, just kind of give up on it. They don't see their role, their contribution, how they might be able to add value to the promise and how it gets delivered into the market. You got to keep these people involved and engaged and excited.
So, what would be your best advice for the marketing brand managers in the world, either B2B or B2C, that operate in the, I'm calling it traditional businesses that are actually selling a physical products? Mm-hmm. How can they, one, get better at their job and to deliver better results?
Well, again, somewhat biased, but I think understand the differences between what a brand is and what marketing is. Marketing is an investment, but if it's not strategically the right investment in that brand and that promise, then it becomes an expense. And in today's world, trust me, any unneeded, as our friend Mr. Musk is beautifully showing in the United States, an expense you don't need it's easy to cut. So you have to really understand that this is an investment in that promise. So as a manager, that all starts with my brand's an asset. My brand isn't marketing. And just going in with that acknowledgement so that then they understand here's the things that I want to do from a market or explore from a marketing angle, but it has to all link back to delivering that and improving on that promise into the marketplace.
And what about the tech startups that are actually developing and revolutionizing mm-hmm. the way we live and the entire landscape? What would be, and I know you have a breadth of experience with those type of businesses, what would be the advice for them? Like how they build most effectively that emotional side of it and take their businesses to the next level?
Yeah. I'm not going to say the same thing as the previous answer, but I have found with the tech entrepreneurs, a great first question that I do ask them is, what business are you in? Or do you want to be in? Are you planning to be in? And I would say 95% of the time they tell me, well, I'm in the business of silicone chips, or I'm in, it's about the actual features of the product. And at that point I go, okay, but I didn't ask you what you made or what you're going to sell. I asked you what business you're in. And they often look at me like I've got three heads. And I go, I just told you, we're producing this. But businesses only survive when they create value. Agree? Shareholder value, customer value, consumer value. If they're not creating value, your business dies. Yes, I agree to that. All right, well, what creates value for any one of those groups? Benefits, not features. So that's what creates value. So the thing I would advise is ask yourself that question and then put the benefit lens on it. Not what are we going to make or what can we make, but great, assume we do that really well. What benefit is that going to create? That is the eye to what business you're in. Well, now that promise and what I need to invest in to keep it is a little broader than simply producing the product itself. And I think that the tech firms that we've worked with that have taken that pause and asked themselves those questions are still in business today.
I love it. You mentioned how much more we know today about the target audience and the target customers just because of the technology and everything. So how critical is the difference in the way that we address different target audiences? That obviously comes to bigger businesses, bigger brands, like not the ones that are starting, that are basically focusing on one niche. So
I'm not sure I'm following the question.
So it's when we tell the stories about our brands, as the brand starts evolving and growing in the business, it starts from a niche and then it expands. As it expands and as it grows, regardless of its price positioning, it's becoming more mainstream in terms of the consumption and usage, at least.
Yeah.
The customer base is bigger and bigger, and we have a different sub audiences within that space. We mentioned that with the technology, we know the nuances, we know and understand our customers, consumers, partners much, much better now than we did when we worked without the technology.
Right.
So my question is, how and should we adjust the storytelling when approaching those different subsegments?
The short answer is yes, with a caveat that the DNA, as we call it, of your brand, what's at the heart of the brand, it's like your DNA. If I change your DNA, you're not Redrig. So you stop being a promise that I can consistently keep because you're changing the DNA. The DNA has to remain the same. But if you go back to benefits versus features, you understand all of those different segments and what they value, what matters to them. The DNA is still keeping their interest and their intent to engage with the brand. But hey, I'm a 15-year-old tech whiz kid who loves to play video games versus his 65-year-old grandfather. They both own an Apple iPhone or whatever, but the reasons behind why they own that DNA'd Apple iPhone will be different emotionally and functionally. Like this guy over here, me being one, I can't even figure out how to turn it on, whereas my kids are showing me how to Photoshop things. So the story about what the phone does for them is different, but you never lose sight of the DNA. It's still an Apple iPhone.
Technology brought the products to our homes much faster, much easier. E-commerce, namely, the entire shopper experience and the shopper journey changed, and it's much easier to start, in my humble opinion at least, it's much easier to start a CPG product and to develop a CPG product today than it was 20, 30 years ago, but it's much, much harder to get on the end consumer table into people's homes. How does someone who wants to start a CPG brand becomes a household brand today?
Basically following those core principles that I talked about earlier. Look, at the end of the day, e-commerce, take Amazon. I can buy anything off Amazon, right? But let's face it, Amazon is a channel. It's how I find, how I choose, and how I receive, how I get that thing that I want to buy. But the brand is still saying, hey, have you thought about buying something? Or if you're thinking about buying in that, mine's different, mine's better, mine's new, so all of what we talked about earlier around the positioning of the brand, in my opinion, and I know some of my colleagues don't agree with me on this, I think the role of the brand becomes even more important when the channel is as, I'm not going to say faceless, but all of those touch points we referred to earlier, half of them or a third of them get wiped out. Because I just put an order on Amazon, it shows up my doorstep the next day. Okay, that's a reality. I still got to be the one that they pick when they place their Amazon order. So all of the needs, telling the promise, telling the stories, consistently keeping that is, in my opinion, even more important when you've lost all those potential touch points.
Yeah, and it just comes back to what you mentioned earlier, not separating brand from the marketing and looking at one commercial approach. And essentially, in a traditional way, as we looked at retail and sales separately to what marketing and brand does, the technology actually just helped us blend it. Well, it blended it for us, and made it obvious that those touch points are very important.
When I started, I was in packaged goods. The grocery channel, the retail channel, I considered to be one of the variables in my brand and my marketing mix. I could engage you at the store as you walk into the store when I'm making you go down this aisle because you got to buy this coffee. And oh, by the way, I can talk to you while you're staring at all of the options on the shelf. So think of those are all touch points. Well, those are gone if I just buy all my groceries on Amazon. But I still got to be the coffee that you want to order. So that's why I say the strength of the brand becomes even more important.
What is your favorite brand?
You know what? I'm always asked this question, and I'm going to give you the same answer, unfortunately. I don't have a favorite brand. I have brands that I watch how they manage themselves, and I have huge respect for them. So go back to the value of a promise consistently kept. I mean, you're putting a tech spin on a lot of your questions, so let's just look into that world. You got to respect Microsoft. They were one of the early players and they're still just as relevant. Do they go through ups and downs? Of course they do. But they never have lost sight that they deliver benefits to people. They don't just sell software. Microsoft to me is an example of a brand that I have huge respect for. Another one is Cadillac. When I was a kid, if your dad owned a Cadillac, I was like, whoa. Okay. Cars have changed. Cars have evolved. But that brand continues to be a premium product for General Motors. Gotcha. And it comes to me in a whole bunch of different ways now, right? So it's evolved with the time. It's remained relevant. Its promise was consistently kept, and they continue to refresh it.
And what about the brand story? What would be your favorite brand story out of all those stories that you've seen or produced?
Well, I always like telling the Crayola one because I sat there and I watched it unfold in front of me. But the CEO who I knew from university years, he just said, "Look, we're having our ass handed to us." Because, smart pads and, iPads, everything, the kids were no longer using crayons. They were tech geeks by the time they were 3, right? And he said, we're just not relevant anymore. And I said, I don't believe that. And I showed him how I would suggest we approach that. He said, well, that's fine, but remember, some of our folks, especially our CFO, really just thinks that brand and marketing is just fluff. It's a cost that if we could get rid of, we'd make more money on. I said, yeah, I hear you. And my first question when I go in to talk to companies is that one I said earlier, that what business are you in? In a nanosecond from the table's answers, I can tell you where this concept that we've been talking about as a brand, where it stands. And all I will say is that when I asked that question around the leadership table, I looked right at the CFO because I knew he was going to be a trouble for me, a little obstacle, a speed bump. And he goes, we're in the crayons business. I said, okay. I said, good. So I took a marker and went over and wrote crayons. Good. I said, look, this is a magic marker. And there's your trademark. That says Crayola on it. That's not a crayon. He goes, okay. We're in the writing instrument business. Come on. Like, this is just a waste of time. By the end of the discussion, story, do you know what business they were in?
Tell me.
Enabling creativity. They were in the business of enabling creativity. And the young woman who was brilliant, she was the head of product development. She said, so if that's the business we're in, we could potentially develop a whole line of products for architects, for draftspeople. Who says it's just got to be for children? And I said, yeah.
There we go.
All you did was answer the question in a different, you changed your frame of reference. Now, they took that and go look at their share price. Crayola is still around, but they do more than make crayons. That's that tactical product led. Like, it's not about just what you today produce or could produce. It's about what's the benefit that they really are delivering. And I've always loved that story. Turned them around.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So for the end, I would like to ask you if you have any questions for me. And that's the way that I would like to finish this podcast series.
So I've been saying to you what I believe a brand is, so I'm interested. You've actually had great experience on both sides of the Atlantic. How much of what I'm saying do you think resonates on both sides of the Atlantic?
That's a great question. I think it does. It resonates 100%. One thing that you actually mentioned in the beginning, and I wasn't paying attention to in our conversation, but it's very important, is the culture and the importance of the culture, whether if we launch a new brand or a new business, or if we're building it onwards, regardless of the stage. My experience says that knowing and understanding the culture is one of the key factors to success, again, regardless of geography. And with technology and with all the insights and the data that is available out there, it makes it easier and harder at the same time. And I'll explain what it means. It's easier because you can get a number of different data. You can talk to AI today and get some insights from the AI as well. But in that overwhelm of the data, one has to know and understand what the positioning is and pick from that data and that flood of and wealth of insights, what is most relevant to create a success for their businesses and their brands in the market. Mm-hmm. So coming back to your question, everything that you said resonates, and I think I mentioned that a number of times. I'm a big fan of yours, and it just a little build on everything that we discussed.
Everyone's the AI, is it a threat or is it a capability? Like, you know what? It's the next thing, right? It's an enabler. So It's how you use it. But let's face it, the key with AI, it's only as good as the data that you feed it. Yeah. So if all of that culture, that nuance, that stuff that people think is fluff isn't part of the data that it's fed, you're basically cutting out 30, 40, 50% of why that brand resonates, in that marketplace.
Yeah.
And I'm talking the internal culture, not just the culture of the company, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you.